So now with the Hezbollah deal coming in possibly in the next few days, or maybe when Trump officially takes office, maybe a few days after that, and a possible some possible deal in Gaza. Now it's time to go back to the good old days when we normalize relationship with dictatorships. And on today's menu is Saudi Arabia. We talked about the normalization of relationships with Saudi Arabia before October 7th last year, I think just a week before, because there was some progress being made. There was a potential deal on the table, and some reports afterwards have been saying that basically this normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia also inspired or was one of the reasons Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th. So we can definitely discuss that. Joining me today is Jonathan, Marco, and Richard. Hey guys, and let me immediately jump to you. Jonathan, you are in Israel. So don't you want to be friends with Saudi Arabians?
I would want to be personally friends with those rational Saudi Arabians. Absolutely, I would. There are some very good people there who are living under their own country's oppression. I've actually know a few people who are suffering tremendously, living under this brutal dictatorship. So I do want to be friends with them. I don't want to be friends with their captives, essentially. Especially if you're a woman, it is one of the worst places in the world to live. You might be rather wealthy, your husband might be wealthy because he has connections, but you don't have rights. You don't have individual rights. Good luck getting a divorce or owning property. Or I'm not an expert in all the various legal aspects of this situation there, but I think it's pretty well known that women aren't equal citizens in Saudi Arabia. Also, if you happen to disagree with Islam, if you're a Christian, they used to have apartheid roads. Where there's a road for non-Muslims and roads for Muslims. I don't know if they still have that. I heard they got rid of those. They also allowed women to drive, so they are certainly making tremendous progress towards a country of individual rights, supposedly. But what we have seen in the last few weeks is how they get better relationships with the Iranians. And some people find it surprising. I mean, they're Sunni, they are Shia, they're supposed to be the worst enemies. But if we look at history, we see a very similar type of bonding in the image of the Ribbentrop-Molotov agreement, where from the one hand you see supposedly two worst enemies, Stalin and Hitler, both, they have completely different ideologies, right? Nazis and communism is completely different, right? And they seem to somehow agree on one thing, killing the Jews. That's something that unites both of them. And indeed, um, we've seen it right now. These supposed bitter enemies, they are more than happy to be friends with each other if what they're united against is the Jews. And I would not be surprised if this trend in America, where they admire dictators in the neoconservative movement, where they love Putin, they love Orban, they love Kim Jong-un, they like the Saudis, and there's no reason they wouldn't like the Iranians as well. I mean, what's the difference? They're all strong dictators, and I think they're kind of envious of their power. So it's a very bad sign that these American politicians, they really like these authoritarian figures. They kind of want to be like them. And it's scary, it's awful. And a country that is a moral country would have nothing to do with a country that is a moral abomination, such an abomination that it is the kingdom, so-called kingdom, of these primitive savages of Saudi Arabia.
Marco, so Lindsey Graham, he's the senator from the US who has been now making the rounds around the Middle East, basically trying to promote this normalization. He was in Israel. He talked to Gallant, among other people, and he's supposed to go to Riyadh now. And something that Gallant said about Lindsey Graham was that among other things, we discussed the vital need to use the short window of opportunity that has opened for forging agreements that will strengthen Israel and weaken Iran and help reach a path that will enable the return of hostages held captive by Hamas in Gaza. Basically, now that Iran is supposedly weakened after the Israeli attack, after pretty much all of their proxies getting either almost completely wiped out or very weakened. Now is the time to basically go to Saudi Arabia and forge an alliance or forge closer relations. Marco, what do you think about that?
Well, I think that's exactly why the West is falling on its ass, really. That's exactly why this kind of capitulation to evil empires, to evil nations, will ultimately cause our demise, the demise of civilization. Because this attitude of the enemy of my enemy is my friend has never really resulted in a happy ending. Always eventually ends up in the party that was your friend turning out to be actually your enemy next week. When the common enemy is dealt with, your former friend will become your enemy. So there is no reason why it should work this time. But this seems to be the kind of diplomacy that the West has been engaging for the last 50, 60, 70 years. It's this kind of Kissinger school of diplomacy, which effectively deals with things on a concrete basis. If your objective is to understand what I'm talking about, effectively everything there is a problem, you propose a solution which is applicable to that particular problem, but doesn't take into account the long-term effects, doesn't take into account what the cause of the problem was in the first place. So you tend to, if you are a doctor, you would treat the symptoms, not the cause of the disease. And that's exactly what's happening all the time in the West. We seem to put a plaster on the issue, but never actually resolve it. And to resolve it would be to stick to the principle that you cannot deal with somebody who actually hates it. Saudi Arabia, yeah, as Jonathan mentioned, they look civilized on the surface. They have modern infrastructure. They are diversifying their economy, mainly because it's spluttering a bit. They need to diversify. But they look from the outside much more civilized than the Iranian nutters, for example. They are Sunni, so they are roughly a bit more moderate than the Shiite. But overall, the philosophy that moved them is still Islam. It's still the philosophy that wants the destruction of Jews, wants the destruction of the West. And although Iran is quite vocal about the West being the great Satan, the US being next, the philosophy that moves the Sunni and Saudi Arabia is the same. Let's not forget that they're not very shy about murdering journalists in Turkey just because they can, just because they want to, just because that's what they do. They get rid of their enemies, unlike the way we deal with them.
Yeah, I mean, if you put Saudi Arabia under the microscope, even at a surface level, it's an absolute monarchy, or in other words, it's a closed autocracy. It doesn't have free and fair elections for the chief executive or the legislature, which puts it in the same camp as North Korea, as opposed to an open autocracy or an electoral autocracy like a Turkey or a Russia, where the ruling party is essentially in power forevermore, and it's an illusion of freedom, free and fair elections. But there is no opposition. There's no plurality in Saudi Arabia, and the government has control of the media, of academia. So, alternative opinion is suppressed. Journalists are taken to trial, go to prison without trial, or of course, as in the case of Jamal Khashoggi, they're murdered if they criticize the regime. So, there are so many ways. I mean, you can't practice publicly other religions apart from Islamic ones in Saudi Arabia. They're prohibited. So there's no judicial independence at all. And of course, what Saudi Arabia uses all the time as its key levers, there are two key levers that it has, is the religious, what would you call it, religious influence and the oil wealth. And those are the two levers they use all the time. Because of course, they've got such centers for pilgrimage for Muslims everywhere. They've got such influence over the rest of the region. They use that, and of course they use the money at the same time from the oil wealth, which is again, using the West, exploiting the West in many ways, or the West succumbing to the need for oil and choosing not to extract its own oil and instead to take it from one of its enemies in this manner. But all of that leads to it having far more influence than it should have. And of course, as the point made earlier about your enemy of your enemy is your friend, all fair weather friends come and go depending on what's happening. And of course, you can see how at the beginning of October the 7th, they were really quite quick to distance themselves. And they do talk out of both sides of their mouths at the same time. So they do sometimes offer covert intelligence, such as when Iran's firing missiles, at Israel. They'll offer some background support, but they'll never admit it publicly. Publicly, they'll say things like Israel is engaging in collective genocide, as they said at one of the Arab conferences. That's their public position on this kind of thing. So what they say they want is things like East Jerusalem being the capital of the Palestinian state in a two-state solution, and that being a part of the deal that they would accept in order to have normalized relations. And of course, you look at their attitude to Yemen, for example, where they supported their main government against the Houthis, like back in 2015. And then more recently, they kind of tempered down a bit when things weren't going so well. Post-October the 7th, they were trying to negotiate with Oman as a mediator. And of course, now, they're sort of back coming to the table to consider normalizing with Israel. So fair weather for enemies. Watch them closely.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to sort of the West's view of Saudi Arabia as an ally, it comes from this like really pragmatic view of geopolitics and view of the world. And even if you look at Saudi Arabia, the only reason why some sort of maybe closer ties are allowed is because Saudi Arabia itself is also very pragmatic. I think one time, I think a few months ago, I read from that Saudi crown prince pretty much said something like he doesn't care about the Palestinian issue, but officially they do care. When there was when you had the new UN General Assembly and Netanyahu had a speech, Saudi Arabia, among other any other Arab nations, they walked out as soon as Netanyahu had a speech, and it was almost sad to look at, because at some point Netanyahu does talk about that Israel is trying to have just be at peace with its neighbors. And he mentioned Saudi Arabia, how they were close to becoming friends. They were close to normalizing relations. And then the camera switches to the Saudi Arabia seat, and they're not there because they have walked out, because they are fundamentally, while you might have some issues, as they say, the Sunni Shia split between Saudi Arabia and Iran, they are enemies. But as soon as it comes to hating Jews, as soon as it comes to hating Israel, the Sunni Shiite split is automatically mended, and they are very glad to go together. So in this world, it's important to remember that, yeah, Saudi Arabia is not special in any way. In the same way that we've supported the Soviet Union because they were fighting the Nazis, and then we had to deal with Soviet Union for 50 more years. I think I mentioned it once before. If we now use Saudi Arabia to basically fight against Iran in some way, and we'll also talk about how Lindsey Graham is thinking about fighting with Iran. But if somehow Saudi Arabia plays a big role in this, what guarantees that, in 10 years or in 20 years, when Iran is no longer a problem, we have the same deal with Saudi Arabia, basically just becoming another sort of just replacing Iran. Jonathan, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. They're an irrational actor. In principle, you just can't trust an irrational actor. What's to prevent the prince or king or whatever they call themselves to wake up one day and they had a dream and Prophet Muhammad told him that he needs to kill all the Jews and then become do a jihad. What's to prevent him from doing that? There's no way you can just trust them. They're irrational. They're devoted to their ugly religion. And there's also we have to understand that the difference between them and the Iranians is essentially the difference between different gangs. These are the Saudi gang. They control that territory. And you have the Iranian gang where they control that territory. There's nothing that they really ideologically disagree with. It's just it's about territory. And if it's for their benefit, they'll have a deal as gangs have done, and throughout history we've all seen The Godfather, right? And they would do whatever it is they consider to be advantages at the time, and then they would go back and kill each other because that's what they're all about.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to remember in Saudi Arabia stands for the family who managed to grasp the power in that specific region. If it was the other family, then we would refer it to whatever other family was there, Arabia, because it is just a gang that managed to took over and now is in power. Marco?
And it's the same thing you have, sorry for now, it's the same thing all over the Arab world. It's all just different tribes fighting each other over controlling a territory. That's the level most of these countries are unfortunately at, and it's very unfortunate, and the people are suffering. And what we should do, what America should really do, is not to say let's normalize this, but say you want to normalize with us, with the US, where they gain so much things from the US, right? They sell weapons and the US buys stuff from them, right? Oil and stuff. I don't know if they buy oil, but they trade a lot. Be normal. You yourself be normal, and then we will normalize with you. Why would we talk to you? You're crazy. You're insane. They are insane.
Yeah, absolutely, Jonathan. You're totally right. Just think about the fact that Mecca is the Mecca for the Muslims. Every Muslim is supposed to visit Mecca at least once in their lifetime, which, by the way, it's a brilliant way of stimulating tourism economy, isn't it? If you force millions of people, hundreds of millions of people, billions of people to visit your tourist store, your Disneyland. But anyway, they are building a massive hotel just overlooking the big mosque where the cube with the stone, the Kaaba. Talking about how bloody primitive you are, people worshiping a stone. But anyway, they are building this big, massive hotel, and it has the biggest clock tower in the world. So that in itself is an achievement which was only possible because they paid off some engineering company in the West to build it, because they haven't got the know-how. Apart from putting up a tent, they wouldn't go much further than that.
Clearly, they're overcompensating for something.
Yeah, well, obviously. Now, you could argue that if you are the engineer that work with them, you're selling your soul quite cheaply. But the worst thing is that they don't allow non-Muslims in Mecca itself. So most of the engineers, they worked on those buildings, on those projects, those massive, massive projects, never really been on site. And the few people that were on site, they were allowed to go on site, is because they had to convert to Islam. So now this is what we do in the West. In order to get something done, and I understand if you're an engineer, that's a unique thing, and it's massively enticing to try and be involved with it. But Jesus Christ, haven't you got any self-respect? Haven't you got any love for life? You choose to convert to into a Muslim in order to access a site in this hellhole of a place, because they believe that they're so racist that they don't allow anyone else who's not a Muslim. So this is the kind of stuff we are supposed to deal with. This is are you really expecting these people to change the tune just because we offer them an olive branch? Do you really think that they give a crap about our appeasement? They will turn to whoever decides to be their friends at the drop of the hat. As you mentioned, it's about power. All they want is to control people, to control. They even use religion as a tool to control people, because they know very well that these engineers I mentioned converted just for a tick box exercise, effectively. But they don't care. They don't care about the religion. They know the ghosts do not exist, but they care about power on earth, because they know that earth is the only place that actually counts, the only place where you can make your hegemonic genocidal ideology work. And they do it, and we fall for it on a constant basis. We continue to, despite the amount of time in history where we have shown that appeasement does not work, because you do not change people's mind by pretending. You change people's mind by proposing better ideas, pushing for better ideas, which is exactly what we do on this channel, trying to make people understand you cannot think in concrete. You must have a principle that you stick with. And that's why for objectivists, it's actually quite easy to understand why this is a wrong thing to do. But politicians, as I mentioned, realpolitik, that's what they do.
And of course, all of these factors betray the fact that all autocracies are anxious autocracies. All dictators are constantly watching their back, and their aim is to preserve power, and hence the use of all of these factors to keep people in hock and at bay. I mean, that's quite clear, and that's what makes them form different allegiances at different times. The aim at one time is to contain Iran, to quarantine the Muslim Brotherhood. At another time, when Israel looks weaker, you're on the side of Israel's enemies. When Israel looks stronger, you're suddenly, offering your hand of friendship. That's the way it works. And I think I came across a survey done by the Washington Institute of Saudi Arabians. So the actual people themselves, I think it covered like 1,000 people interviewed in Saudi Arabia. And some of the attitudes there speak volumes about the real attitudes of the people and how it differs from the message that's sometimes given by the government, of course. So 96, this was carried out towards the end of last year, so bear that in mind. 96% of Saudis believe that all Arab countries should cut ties with Israel. 96%. Or put a different way, in a slightly different way.
That's down from 98%, so we are going in the right direction.
Now that women can drive, absolutely, yeah. Or put a different way, in a slightly differently worded question, only 5% of Saudis agreed that showing more respect to Jews and improving relations with Israel was a good idea. 91% consider what's been happening in Gaza as a win for Palestine, for Arabs and for Muslims. And 87% thought that Israel was weak and internally divided, and they were obviously cheering that factor. And 16% were in favor of a two-state solution, but only 16% would accept a two-state solution based on 1967 borders. What the other 84% would like is probably a one-state solution where Israel doesn't exist, same as most Arab countries. I don't think they actually asked that question in the survey, but was revealing, and of course that's what you see in the dictatorship, in how it plays the ignorant population that it has in vast measure, together with the religion that ensures that they remain ignorant for as much as possible, and at the same time gives a different message to different committees and bodies and external mediators when it comes to the best current deal on the table for the temporary time that we're going to stick to it. At least that's the way they're approaching it, I think.
Yeah, and countries like the US or even Israel might think that, because Saudi Arabia is a dictatorship, they can get away with basically just not listening to the people and normalizing relations with Israel. But you have to realize that even a dictatorship has to care about what their people want. They can get away with more stuff than liberal democracies, but they cannot completely ignore. People will revolt, and I'm not sure who of you said it, but the main purpose of a dictatorship or of a dictator is to stay in power, and they'll do anything they want. And if it means something like not normalizing relations with Israel, they'll do that. They will have no problem with doing that. We have a few super chats. We have a super chat from PC. Thank you so much. He says, as I think Marco, you've mentioned, non-Muslims cannot enter Mecca and Medina. We have another super chat from PC. Thank you so much. He says Saudi is not trustworthy. And a super chat from Alex. She says Marco is giving us some beautiful dava, which I googled, and I think it basically means Muslim proselytizing. It's inviting people to hear more about the word of Prophet Muhammad. But going back to Iran, because something that's I think really disturbing about this is that someone like Lindsey Graham, he recognizes Iran is the real threat. He recognizes Iran is the enemy behind basically what's happening against Israel. It's the threat to America as well. But what he sees as the solution, again, is allying with Saudi Arabia. I think something he has said is an Iranian Ayatollah armed with nuclear weapons is an existential threat to Israel and nightmare for the world. They consistently refer to the United States as a big Satan. And so his solution to that is allying with Saudi Arabia. To do what? I mean, do you think that as soon as you forge that alliance, suddenly the Ayatollah will be like, oh, now there's two of them. I'm just not gonna develop my nuclear arsenal. Again, I don't see, unless and I think that's the only solution. The only solution is a direct attack on Iran, at least at the nuclear sites or at the regime itself. It's long overdue. It's decades overdue, and there is absolutely no reason that this shouldn't happen. And I simply don't see any reason why an alliance with Saudi Arabia brings us to that any closer, unless you do want to use Saudi Arabia to attack Iran together, which I don't think is needed. And again, as we've talked about, it will just strengthen Saudi Arabia as just a replacement for Iran. But Jonathan, what do you think?
Yeah, it sends a clear message of weakness, a message of it's anti-American, really. Why does America need these this country, Saudi Arabia, to attack Iran while America has the biggest, most expensive, most technologically advanced military in human history? Why the hell does it need the Saudis? How does that help this right objective that this senator has mentioned? It is absolutely correct that the Iranians are the #1 enemy to freedom in the Middle East right now. That is absolutely correct, but that doesn't have to do with the Saudis. And the way he sees things is just bizarre. It doesn't make sense. It's irrational. I mean, maybe somebody in the comments can enlighten us. Why does that help America? I think you raised a very good question there. How does that help America or Israel to achieve the mission where both America and Israel are far more capable air force to carry out such an operation, as we've seen with the Israeli Air Force that it has carried out such an operation. I don't understand why it hasn't done again what it another operation in Iran and do what it has to do. Fundamentally, the country that I'm most angry at for this situation is Israel. Why does Israel even entertain the option of normalizing relations with these Saudis especially after October 7th, when we've seen how they are, we've seen their true faces, right? And we've seen how Israel is capable of carrying out strikes against Iran, as they have done successfully to their rather meek aspirations of taking out their anti-air defense systems. So I don't see the point. And especially now that America will have a proper energy policy, supposedly, we'll see, it will be entirely independent of the Saudis for energy purposes. So I really don't see what's the gain there. What's the gain?
Well, if I'm allowed to be cynical, the gain is access to the markets, to the petrol dollar of the Saudi, really. They are about to embark in some diversification. The floating of 1.5% of Aramco in 2018, was it? That allowed lots of money to flow across the Atlantic. And the problem is that our mixed economy means that politicians are in charge of a big amount of money, and they think they can control the economy by playing different people, playing second fiddle to dictators just because they got big market. Just today, our glorious prime minister went to lick the boot of Xi Jinping. Why is he doing that after we've been very, very cold in terms of policy with China? Because he thinks he can stoke the economy by selling some services to the dictator of China. These people are only interested in holding power. Our politicians, super corrupted by the inability of thinking by principles, lacking the knowledge of why our civilization is superior to these dictators, are quite happy to compromise. They're quite happy to sell their wares, thinking that by doing that, they will be able to stay in power a bit longer. That's all it is. There's no other reason why the West would compromise with this kind of actors. There's no reason whatsoever.
I think another factor in it is the fact that again, people don't stand on their own values enough in the West, and they think that they need a coalition of other nations in order to bolster the values that they hold. They think that a majority of more people is going to give more credence to the position that they hold. And obviously, in an age when people are obviously banding about colonialization all the time, again, that makes them unduly keen to work with local partners all the time, regardless of whether those values conflict, so long as they can be brought into a particular team to work on a particular issue for a given time. That seems to give it an authenticity which it shouldn't hold, and that leads you to work with people who who are eventually going to stab you in the back. And it's a repeated pattern, whether it's in Afghanistan or whatever. You've seen it endlessly, and it keeps falling into the same error. Whereas the best way of dealing with it is exactly the kind of things we've been pinpointing here. If you develop your own independent energy where you can properly, you're not reliant upon the oil in Saudi Arabia, and you can choose to demonstrate through your own growth and prosperity that that's the path to follow by example, then eventually the countries in the rest of the world that are no longer able to parasite off you will have to take that road if they wish to survive in a similar manner.
Yeah, I mean, not even like developing some domestic energy production, but stop denying the companies in your nations from developing that. This almost like yeah, this idea that we no longer need like fossil fuels, or no longer need to produce like actual cheap energy, and we can just rely on other nations, or we can rely on something else, is again so misleading. But yeah, now switching to the sort of other topic we had prepared. It's still in the same ballpark, I would say. The Lebanon deal. So there is a deal on the table, uh, and so let's discuss that. So the outline of the deal, basically, it looks like pretty much, at least from the US side, both sides, and by that I mean Biden administration and the upcoming Trump administration, are, at least from my understanding, pretty much want Hezbollah deal, and there is a deal on the table. Basic outline is the classic: withdrawal north of the Litani River by Hezbollah, deployment of Lebanese army to the south, prevention of weapons smuggling and deliveries from Syria. This has been a status quo, or the supposed status quo, for about 20 years, that these things should have already been happening. And because of that, Israel basically said they want another guarantee. They wanted a right to basically go into Lebanon if either the Lebanese army or the peacekeeping forces are not enforcing the deal. At the start, Lebanon said they pretty much want no change to the UN resolution, UN Security Council resolution 1701. Because that worked so well. That was already in force, or in force, technically in force for 70 years, from 2006, which had all these things. The UN peacekeeping forces were in the south. Hezbollah was not supposed to be in the south, yet they were, and nothing was being done about it. And when Israel tried to inform the UN about it, hey, Hezbollah is still in the south and nothing is happening, United Nations said, yes, you're right, and now you can go. Basically, nothing was solved.
Not only that, but they also invented a kind of policing force, UNIFIL, and was supposed to enforce what the resolution said. And what did they do? While we're seeing what they do, they allowed Hezbollah to use their facilities.
Yeah, maybe they just missed each other. They always, the Hezbollah took roads at 6 a.m., UNIFIL took roads at 12 p.m., so they just missed each other. Because again, I always like to mention, when we talk about the UNIFIL's forces in the south of Hezbollah, this is not just, they have like one base somewhere and they are just there. They were spread out all over the place, and it was at heights, I think it was dozens of different nations who were involved in this, and nothing was being done about Hezbollah. Now that Israel has gone into Lebanon, now that Israel has started dismantling this, they found staging grounds for October 7th like attack. They found Hezbollah tunnels. Pretty much, you could see the Hezbollah tunnels from the UNIFIL bases. So sort of like saying, let's just go. It's sort of like the 67 border. Well, let's just go there, because that worked so fine. Again, it's a complete. It's just ridiculous. Jonathan?
It's pure insanity. It's pure. They're just. I mean, this is probably one of the issues that angers me the most. People who have lived through the 2006 war, which resulted in this infamous 1701 resolution. How can they support this? That's mental for me. That is just crazy. I was in school then, so I don't remember. But people who've actually lived through this, how could they support this? This is crazy, and it is unbelievably. It's even treasonous for the prime minister to negotiate with the enemy while he sends our troops to die there in Lebanon needlessly. he and the military and all these people, we have lost so many soldiers there, and so much has been invested into reaching this momentum, this stage of war, where they are on the run, and we've killed and injured so many. We have eliminated their leadership, and now we are cutting a deal with them. That is that is a betrayal. That is a betrayal of the Israeli people, of the soldiers fighting, of everything that is good in the world. It is just awful, disgusting. I really am. I don't have a lot of words to describe how disgusting it is, and the fact that the people here in Israel, they're willing to accept that, that really makes me question staying here.
Marco?
Yeah, well, this deal is not as stupid as the three-prong deal that Biden was pushing in the summer, is it, with Gaza? However, it's effectively holding a status quo plus a little codicil that Israel has rightly added. What they want is the ability to intervene, carry on operations in Lebanon in case there are breaches to the.
But Mark, that's bullshit. Oh, sorry, there's a siren. Wait, I need to go to the show.
Sure. All right.
Yeah.
So
that's exactly what happened. Hezbollah keeps throwing a rocket, has been throwing rocket at Israel for since October the 7th. Every day they get a showering of hundreds of rockets from Hezbollah. So the fact that Israel wants to keep for themselves the possibility to strike into Lebanon if the resolution is not followed, if the terms of this agreement are not kept to. I think it's totally right. I think they kind of learn from the past. They know that they cannot rely on the UN, especially now when the UN has slipped its mask, has showed exactly what it is. So any idea that Israel should compromise on this very point, I can understand that they want to free up the northern front, if you like, perhaps to focus a bit more on Iran. But again, why would you want to do that? I mean, you're carrying out a very successful campaign. Even yesterday, they got rid of the spokesperson from Hezbollah. Why don't you carry on? Why wouldn't you try to stop the deal and keep hitting the areas that that are Hezbollah? Everybody knows that are Hezbollah, and that's why the whole quarter of Daesh is Hezbollah stronghold. Everybody knows it. The government in Lebanon knows it. France knows it. France that supports Lebanon so much knows perfectly well where Hezbollah is hiding and what they're doing. So the idea of asking Israel to go down a route of appeasement and going down for this deal is just laughable, and they really shouldn't go for it.
I mean, to believe this is going to work, you'd have to rely on delusion, self-deception, and evasion of the reality of both the present and the recent past, including how UNIFIL operated. I mean, in order to be that consistently incompetent, you'd have to be competent, wouldn't you? And deliberately avoid looking in the right direction at the right time. It's utterly implausible that it's not corrupt from top to bottom, and that's what's allowed Hezbollah to have such a infrastructure and weaponry, and in an area that is supposed to be neutral and supposed to be monitored. And the idea that Israel is going to be able to intervene in this area, I mean, that's going to be struck out the deal or watered down from the deal, or of course, even within the deal as it stands, it already has this notion of through diplomacy or through force, which always means that the force is always in brackets, and everybody will always say, no, you need diplomacy, no matter how many breaches there are, no matter how many rockets there are from Hezbollah into Israel attacking innocent Israelis. So it will never actually be in the form that people say it will be. So there's a deal on the table, but there's a very different deal under the table, and that's the one that people shouldn't be conned into agreeing to.
Jonathan, you safe?
So far, I'm safe. There are sirens around Tel Aviv. So far, from what I can tell, nobody has been hit. I think the projectiles have been intercepted by our aerial defense systems.
Yeah, and I don't want to immediately make a political point out of this, but this is what like Israelis are going through. It's like a normal situation, basically. Well, you have a siren, because it's unbelievable. Like, I think Alex mentioned it in the chat and just a bit earlier. There was another Hezbollah attack, and so far, one person died in that attack. That is still happening. There is still a real threat coming out of Hezbollah, coming out of Hamas, coming out of all different terrorist groups around Israel. And the fact that the solution to this is, again, negotiation, is basically just making sure Hezbollah survives. Because yeah, on the deal it says, well, it doesn't even talk about the destruction of Hezbollah. It talks about withdrawing of Hezbollah, of dismantling Hezbollah forces in the south, of dismantling Hezbollah military structures.
But as I was saying the other when I was interrupted by the siren, this idea of Israel having the right to act in Lebanon whatever it pleases is so ridiculous and stupid and immoral. It's a lie by Netanyahu to show the Israeli people, look, it's not we reserve the right. What would they do if you like? Let's say you don't have the right. What would they do? They will shoot down the F-35s when you send them around Lebanon. With missiles, will they shoot down the F-35s? Will they send their MiGs to intercept them? What does it mean that they have a right to act? That's stupid.
Sure. And of course, if you want to get rid of Hezbollah, what you have to do, flatten the Iranian regime. That's ultimately the way of getting rid of Hezbollah, the Houthis, Hamas, and all the proxies that are acting on behalf and with the support of Iran, isn't it?
We have a super chat from Jonathan, thank you so much, and a super chat from PC, thank you so much. Can you imagine people in UK coping like Israelis do? The 1940 Blitz spirit here is long gone. Yeah, I mean it's unbelievable to really look at what's happening in Israel, and that the solution again is negotiations. I mean, just to talk a little bit more about the deal. So on some level, Lebanon is agreeing. It's hard to say exactly what's happening. On some level, Lebanon is agreeing, while Hezbollah isn't, because apparently this the actual deal would involve sort of Israel having the right to go back in, as well as the point about the implementation of the deal either through dialogue or through force. I mean, we can already deal with this through force by destroying Hezbollah. And another comment from Lebanon was pretty much that, unless Hezbollah is on board, we cannot be on board. And that brings me back to the point we've made again some time ago. Lebanon is Hezbollah, and Hezbollah is Lebanon. This is a terrorist organization. You are allowing to basically control part of your nation. You are giving them a seat in your government. You are giving them positions of power when it comes to certain ministries. They are part of you, and saying, well, unless they agree, we cannot really come in. It reminds me of when Israel attacked. I think it was the pager attack, or maybe an attack after that. But when they've said the attack on the pager attack was an attack on Lebanese sovereignty. I mean, come on, you are not a sovereign nation. If you allow terrorist group to operate like that, you are not sovereign nation in any way. You can be a sovereign nation, and one of the steps is actually maybe for once or finally actually doing something about Lebanon, doing something about a foreign power, Iran, having a proxy inside of your nation, and maybe doing something about that. But no, there is nothing. They are fully bought in with Hezbollah and are not intending to do anything about it. And trying to act as Lebanon is in any way separate from Hezbollah is ridiculous. Jonathan?
What this government, Israeli government, is doing now is essentially like, let's say we're at Normandy. We have done Normandy. There was a beachhead. We've lost a lot of troops. It was a difficult battle. And then we say, okay, Hitler, let's got a deal. We will control this. The Normandy, maybe we'll put UNIFIL, the League of Nations, we'll put them on the shoreline. They will protect, make sure that you don't cross the English Channel, and we will reserve the right to bomb Berlin whenever we want. That is, I don't know if it's the best example, but it's obvious that when you manage to secure the hardest part, which is to get the momentum, you've made it to continental ground. You're now inside the country of Lebanon, right? It's an anarchy, as Dan, you have alluded, a good example for an anarchy. And you want to surrender. Let's just surrender because we don't want to fight. We just want to push the barrel down. And well, we've clearly seen what they want to do, right? We've clearly seen the tunnels and all their plans. They want to do the same thing. So what do? Okay, well, we'll bring UNIFIL. We'll just reserve the right. We'll bomb you from the air whenever we please, as if you couldn't do that until now. It's in Israel, we have a name for these things. It's called an Israblof, And this is what Netanyahu is trying to sell the Israeli people, and it's disgusting, and it's a shame that it's a disgrace to all the soldiers that have heroically fallen in these very difficult battles that are still ongoing in Lebanon. It's just disgusting.
Yeah, and let's not forget that nearly 800 soldiers died since October the 7th in retaliation, in response to the attack that Israel has been under. So it's a serious situation, but we're not privy to what actually happens with governments and deals like this. So my hope is that Israel is putting these clauses knowing very well that Hezbollah will never agree to it. So I hope that they just use these negotiation as a bone thrown to the international community and say, look, we're doing what we can. They don't want it. And at the same time, I hope they continue pounding Hezbollah, destroying their resources, destroying their stronghold, destroying their casual weapons. Because, I mean, if you look at the amount of stuff that they already captured, it's just mind-boggling. It's just incredible the amount of weaponry that they have recovered, especially in the zone that was supposed to be demilitarized, in the zone that was under the eyes of the UNIFIL and the UN itself. Tunnels and depots and houses with ballistic missiles in the garages or in the loft pointed at Israel, ready for a massive assault, October 7th style times 10. I mean, this thing can carry on. So Israel cannot possibly really consider a solution, a treaty with their own enemies. They can't possibly do that. I just hope that they're trying to string them along and keep pounding them.
And this idea that other countries, whether it's the US general or a French general, will be part of a body together with some unspecified Arab country that would have the right to adjudicate each time as to whether Israel had the right to defend itself from rocket attack. We know where that leads. We've seen, and if we've learned nothing from this period since October the 7th, you've seen how even your topmost allies for Israel are frequently telling Israel to hold back, to not respond, to just suck it up, to take the win. And why wouldn't that continue? So if you agree to this deal, then you're agreeing to that principle, the principle that they can interfere with your ability to keep your own citizenry safe, which is against the initiated aggression from outside, which should be, absolutely sacrosanct.
Sorry, I've been a bit off. It looks like the siren that Jonathan heard and the attack that came out actually did some damage. So let's quickly watch the video because I have one just to see what's happening. So this is in Tel Aviv. I don't yet see any comments from any news about it yet, so we don't know. But it actually something did happen. So hopefully hopefully no one was attacked, or sorry, no one was hurt. But gee, that's incredible. I mean, that's terrible. This is like actually happening, and it's on the same day where we talk about Israel making deals with. We don't know yet. I've seen one post saying it's Hezbollah, but we don't know anything yet. But whoever it is, Israel is actively negotiating with them. So maybe we'll see. Hopefully, nothing bad will happen. But if we hear more about it, maybe we can make a episode later. But for now, Jonathan, any closing thoughts, and where can people find you?
Yes, thank you, Dan. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, it is a very disturbing news that my government, the Israeli government, is willing to give up everything that it has gained for nothing, for a piece of paper. I like the example in the chat of Chamberlain. We've brought peace, and we can wave our paper signed by whoever the person is signing in Lebanon. And Netanyahu can sell that story, and I'm sure he will manage to sell that because he's a sort of a magician. So that is very disturbing, very upsetting. And what can we hope? I'm not very optimistic by that news at all. Our viewers can find me on Substack at philosophyIneeded.com. I've just uploaded a very interesting podcast on the YouTube. You can find that through the Substack, so go check that out. Very interesting interview with an artist.
Indeed. Well, if you understand the philosophy for living on Earth, Ayn Rand's philosophy, you will understand that evil as such only benefits from the default of the good. So every time you empower evil by your own actions, effectively you're going against your self-interest. And your self-interest, whether you're a politician who want to make the economy better, well, there is a solution. Unleash the potential in your country. Let entrepreneurs, let producers produce. Get out of the way. Remove regulation. Let people drill for oil and gas and resources. Do not stand in the way of this. You don't need to appease a dictatorship in some hellhole somewhere in the world in order to sell a couple of cars. You can do it by allowing people to to be free intellectually and productively. The same for Israel. If you want to defend yourself, be selfish, rationally selfish, follow your self-interest and defend yourself every time you're attacked.
And what's changed the dynamic in this region? It's been only in the last few months. It's been only since the pager attack, in reality, since that pushback against evil, since the destruction of evil by the good. And that's what's changed the dynamic. That's what's forced evil back. And that's been the only way that progress has been made. And to not pursue that lesson to the end, and to give up too early and to appease and to essentially retreat and allow evil to creep back in is just going to destroy you in the end. So it needs moral clarity as to why it's necessary to destroy Hezbollah utterly in the same way you destroy Hamas utterly, and you make sure that the principles on which they're based are also given up on by those that have pursued them, because they can see how futile they are in the end. So I think that's obviously the way to go. But Briefly Objective is one way of finding some of the stuff that we make clips for, and the links here below for short form material taken from this channel with added visuals just to really make the point, as well as, of course, checking out the Substack for Ayn Rand Centre UK and all the articles on there on many different subjects, including Israel.
You can find me on my YouTube channel, Damn Dan. Just quickly, one more news. This is from the IDF. It was reported that there was an alert for a missile aimed at the center of the country, Tel Aviv specifically. It was intercepted by the Iron Dome system, but the fragment fell in this is in Hebrew, I don't know. But in one of the locations which caused the fire, which we've seen, there are no reports of injuries yet.
I've seen a report of 3 lightly injured individuals, from what I can tell.
Okay, so as I said, we might report on this later when we have more information. But again, it just goes to prove the point that yeah, no negotiations can happen with people who are behind this, whoever it is. Thank you guys for joining me today. Thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you definitely tomorrow with another episode of the Daily Objective and the reality show, and maybe later tonight. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Yes.